Okay, time for episode 37. With you as always is me, Chucky, from the forums, and we've got Jigsaw.
Indeed, we do.
5 more movies to discuss. What have we got for today's show?
Well, as always, we have a fun and eclectic lineup tonight. We start off with the Italian classic House on the Edge of the Park from 1980. Then we follow that up with Paranormal Activity 2, which is the sequel to the first movie, which we covered some episodes back. Then we have I believe it's Indonesian movie, The Raid, also known as The Raid Redemption, depending on where you reside, from 2011. Then we have Fright Night Part 2 from 1988. And then we finish off with the George A. Romero movie Bruise from 2000.
Okay, we'll get things started off with House on the Edge of the Park from 1980. So, two low-life punks invite themselves to a party at a posh villa, and after being taunted by their snobbish hosts, they hold everyone hostage and subject them to various forms of torture and mayhem. This is a movie that I actually blind bought this so many years ago, and I actually only just now watched it. I didn't really know too much about it, outside of the fact that, it's got David Hess in it, who we've seen in some other movies. He's played some low-life type characters, and it's directed by Ruggero Deodato, if I've pronounced that correctly, who is quite famous for Cannibal Holocaust. And we also recently talked about one of his other films, Cut and Run.
Not to mention Body Count some time ago.
Though that one was a little more tame compared to the other 3, including this one. So, based on just those few facts, I kind of knew what to expect to some degree. I did somewhat get out of it what I was expecting to get out of it. This is one of those movies that I'm just going to have a very tough time rating, because, to be honest, I don't know how much I enjoyed it. But I will say that it is a little odd that for a movie that's got so much, well, let's just say rape, I feel like the more and more I watch these types of movies, they have a little less effect on me, like in terms of, being tough to watch. I didn't find this one as tough to watch as some previous movies of the same nature, so I don't know, maybe I'm just getting a little desensitized to these.
The actually interesting thing about that, because I was thinking about that, but based on the ending of the movie, you could argue that the situation they got themselves in was almost expected. So maybe it wasn't as, it was still rape, but it might have been in smidge more consent there because they sort of knew going in what might happen.
Yeah, that's a decent point. However, even before we get the kind of plot reveal towards the end, I still didn't feel like it was all that difficult to watch, at least compared to some other movies, like I was saying, of similar nature.
Yeah, I think the most troubling scene as far as the sexual violence goes was probably the opening, which is just a very quick scene. It wasn't particularly graphic, but you can just imagine something like that happening. So this one has been on my radar for quite some time. It's one of those movies I've just heard about, never heard that much about it. And to be honest, I'm not sure if I've ever even read a review on this one. I've just known about it, never seen it, and I finally watched it, and I thought it was pretty much what I expected. It's like exploitation movie 101 in a way.
Yeah.
There's nothing groundbreaking here. There's nothing like overly brutal. It's nothing like surprisingly shocking. It's just exploitation 101. It's for the type of movie it is, it's well done. I thought David Hess in particular had fantastic acting. And it's not like Chucky said, there's not like a whole lot of story here. Pretty much these people are trapped in this house for like most of the movie, and they try to do something, and then boom, they get tortured in some way or humiliated. So yeah, it's not like there's a whole lot of meat to this story, but I thought it was, for what it was, I thought it was well done. And I think the biggest issue with this is, one, I'm not sure there's going to be a whole lot of rewatchability for this one. And two, like you said, I also don't know if this is a movie I particularly enjoy. I can see it was decently well made, but I didn't enjoy that much of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, for a good portion of the film, I was just sitting there wondering, like, is this movie going anywhere? Like, what? It's like, okay, they're at this house, some raping stuff happens.
I have to say, the whole, like, I mean, I know I grew up in a different time, but the whole idea of, city folk just going to this house in the country just for like a get together, and I have no idea how this friends like, there's this one black woman, there's like some rich people. I have no idea who these people are and how they became friends, but the whole story just seemed a bit different to me, just because that's some type of experience that I've not really had.
Yeah. Because when I first started watching this movie, I was getting a little confused. We see David Hess, kind of dressing up, and they're playing some disco music here and there. And I was like, am I watching House on the Edge of the Park, or am I watching Saturday Night Fever?
To bust both worlds.
Get some Bee Gees going. Let's see where it goes.
But the question is, but will they be staying alive?
Very nice. But as I was saying, because I was wondering where the movie was going, but as soon as they actually started revealing, okay, why certain things happened, okay, then it started to pay off a little, I guess. Because I was genuinely confused in the earlier stages. Like, this guy's just nonchalantly like, here's $20, $40, fix this problem that I don't even have with my car. Like, it just seemed odd.
It's sort of funny, because that guy, throughout the whole movie, well, throughout most of the movie, he has a very calm demeanor. Like, given the situation, he seems oddly calm about everything. He actually reminded me of that rich guy from The Porch. The long hair and just that face.
Yeah.
And I thought he was very... I mean, we never know that much about the character, but I thought he was one of the more interesting characters there. And just the way he was acting with these people, like, from the beginning, it just seemed strange, but at the same time, I don't know about you, but I'll be honest, that thing at the end sort of took me by surprise.
Yeah, it did for me a little too. Which did help, because I felt like I don't know, it helped take the movie just up to a different level.
Like, otherwise it would have just been like, quote-unquote, aimless violence, which is fine and it has its place, especially in exploitation movies, but at the same time trying to make a little more of a quote-unquote story with it, I can appreciate that.
Yeah. I guess the only other thing that I wanted to touch on here was maybe some of the music in the movie, like especially that one song, that Sweetly song. It may be played a little too much, but at the same time, I felt like the inclusion of that song did add like a touch of, I don't know, kind of like a bit of a creepy vibe to it. Yeah, I don't know if it was the same for you, but I felt like if they didn't have that or any of the other little similar sounding type music in the movie, that probably would have detracted a little bit from my rating.
Yeah, I think the it's a very retro soundtrack. I really dug that. I'm not like the biggest disco guy, but I still enjoy the style they were going for. Now, I did have one question for you. Which one of those women was the most attractive in your eyes?
The longer haired brunette is probably, like, if I had to choose. Yeah.
That is a decent choice.
Okay, so what's your choice?
I forget the I mean, it should be sad beforehand. It's also sort of awkward for a movie like this anyway, because these women are spin situations that are undesirable. But I thought the girl who popped up near the end was decently attractive.
Cindy, is that?
Yeah, that was her name. Because he did that annoying song. That's one song I could have done without. On a side note.
A little too petite for me, but okay.
Oh, yeah, but she had a very, very cute, almost innocent look to her, so I can dig that. Although something should be sad for, and I also forget this character's name, and to be fair, I'm not sure how much character names matter in this movie, but the main short-haired woman who was sort of doing that, sort of flirting with the David Hass's character. I didn't necessarily find her attractive, but she was certainly seductive. I guess this one thing I did want to mention. it's just like a small piece of trivia which may or may not be interesting, but according to IMDb, they are trying to work on a sequel to this movie, and I'm not sure what the state of that production is. I know I read an article about it some months ago, and I'm not sure why they would be doing it after 40-something years. But I just thought that was interesting, and hey, maybe we can see a continuation of this beautiful story.
Hey, I mean, if they can make another I Spit on Your Grave, I guess anything's possible.
Hey, and they made a bunch of those too anyway, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the original director making another one with the original actress, and that was somewhere around the late 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was 78.
Okay, well, my final rating for this one. Look, this is... before I actually give my rating, I just want to say, and I touched on this earlier, I'm not 100% sure what to give this movie. Just because I feel like if I watch it again, I may rate it differently. I'm going to go with a 6 out of 10, but I feel like if I watch it again, I might... Sometimes I pick up on little things that I just didn't pay enough attention to the first time. And I feel like this is one of those movies... I had some enjoyment of it. I just... Yeah. We'll see how it goes next time.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to go much the same route, give this a 6 out of 10. Like I said, Exploitation 101, it's pretty basic, but it has a few, I guess you could say, surprises thrown in there, so it might make it a little more worth watching. And obviously, if you enjoy David Haas or Deodato, and you haven't seen this, it's probably worth watching for that reason too. It has a pretty decent vibe going forward, and even though there's not like a whole lot of things going on, there's still occasionally some suspense. And I don't know, it's not a great movie, but it's decently well made, and it still might be worth a shot if that's your type of thing.
Yeah, it's got a bit of a silly slow motion scene towards the end too.
Oh yeah, I have to say that scream is pretty beautiful.
Imagine getting an Oscar for that performance. Put him on the ballot. Put him on there.
I'd vote for him. But I guess, speaking of movies that don't deserve Oscars, next up we have Paranormal Activity 2. So, pretty much, if you guys remember the first movie, there was a house that had paranormal activity in it, and they recorded it with cameras, and this movie has the same thing, only it's a family as opposed to a couple. A family with a young teen daughter and a newborn child, and there's more paranormal activity. And it's just great. And those kids, because things are moving, and well, I mean, nothing moves for like 48 minutes, but things are creepy and stuff. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, so it's Paranormal Activity 2. It's pretty much like the first movie, only I'll be honest and say I actually liked it a little bit more. It's not easy for me to say why that is, but I'll try to think of something while you explain how you feel about this one, Trackett.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have a stab that maybe for you it's a little more enjoyable, just because there's more characters, there's just more people involved, I guess, this time.
I do have to say, the element of a family as opposed to a couple does add a little something, because I think the couple from the first movie, who actually, on a side note, do show up in this movie because this family is related, which I thought was a really interesting element. But the couple from the first movie had these... I know every couple argues, but they had these like stupid arguments and like backbiting from both of them, and at least this family unit is, they seem like an actual family, a privileged middle class family, but they seem like an actual family. So I do think that added a little something more to this one. I don't think it hit it over the top by any means, but I will say that's probably a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, I actually saw this one in theaters. Lucky me. Look, I'd pretty much go watch almost any horror movie at that time. And look, I somewhat enjoyed the first movie. Like, enjoy might be a strong word, but I thought it was decent. Now, I don't think there was a whole lot more to really add that could have taken it higher than what the first one did. I mean, the first one was a pretty simple movie. It made a lot of money, and that's why it's got a lot of sequels. I remember when I watched this at the theater, I actually didn't I felt like I enjoyed it more or less somewhat on the same level as the first movie. But as I watch it again, I actually don't. And I think a big part of that is like what you alluded to earlier, that, you know, there's not a whole lot happening, especially in the first half of the movie. And, you know, it's like, well, we've kind of seen this before in the first movie where they just build and build. And in fact, I thought the first movie did a little bit better, if not only for the addition of a lot of the scenes happening seemed to be a lot darker, and I don't know, just a build up towards some of the occurrences just felt a little more creepier, like, you know, just occasionally hearing footsteps and maybe something slightly moving and happening while you sleep. I don't know, the thought of something standing over you while you sleep is just, you know, that creeps me out a little bit more than just random pots and pans flying around and, you know.
That pool cleaner just jumping out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking, like, I'm glad the wife made a big deal about that at some point, because I was thinking, like, is anyone going to question that? I mean, it just seems so stupid. And I guess another thing is the fact that these guys have cameras all through the house. I'm just thinking, you've got no privacy whatsoever. I mean, you can't go take a shit without someone watching you, or potentially going back and watching you.
I feel like if it's a family, you can probably trust that each other aren't watching other family members' stuff, okay? But that's just me.
Well, no, I mean, not if you've got younger siblings or older siblings. But look, I kind of do like the fact that this one connects somewhat with the original movie. You know, we've got what's her name, Katie. I refer to her as Big Boobs. She has some involvement here.
I personally find her advice somewhat shit, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Just to talk about it and it'll be okay.
I guess the other thing with found footage movies is, I mean, they're trying to pass this off as recovered footage from, you know, some real life event, but it kind of kills it at the end when you actually have legit end credits for all these characters.
Yeah, I just want to say that, to my knowledge, there has been absolutely zero evidence of supernatural or any paranormal activity. So as soon as they come back with actual evidence, just let me know, and then I might take this is based on a true story thing a little more seriously. I have to say, that's like a big pet peeve for me. Found footage is a very interesting style to make movies in, and I think it's actually done a lot of, it brought a lot of things, you know, potential new ideas to the genre. But trying to pass it off as a true story when everyone knows it's fake, I just don't get what the point is, and I immediately take away at least 8 points for that. It just pisses me off so much.
I don't know what the difference is between the regular version and the extended version, but I watched the extended version. I don't feel like it did anything for me. So I'd hate to think what the normal version was. I don't recall what it was when I saw it in theaters.
Yeah, I have to admit, I probably watched the original version, and so I have no idea what footage you saw that I didn't. But I have a hard time believing it would make a whole lot of difference.
Yeah.
The ending to this one was interesting, but for some reason, it's just some, like, it's supposed to be like an emotional punch in the gut type ending type thing, but it didn't do anything for me. And I suspect a big part of that was because I had to sit through the first hour and 25 minutes before anything of moderate interest happened. So the ending, I can imagine some people in theaters were like, "Oh my god!" But I think I woke up for a few moments and like, "Oh hey, that's almost okay," and then I think I went back to sleep. So it's just, all of this is to say, this is really not my type of movie. I wasn't a big fan of the first movie, And I do think this movie is marginally more entertaining, if only because the family unit makes it a little more, I guess, a little more depth thrown in there. I did like the whole element between the teenage daughter, believing in herself, and the father sort of, throwing it aside, It was, family elements, but even so, I'm throwing this one a 4.5 out of 10. I'm going to round it down to a 4 out of 10. And much like the first movie, I just got very little enjoyment out of this. And hey, maybe the third movie will be better. So.
Well, I also saw the third movie in theaters, and from memory, it's not really any better.
No, I'm not hopeful.
But probably not really any worse either.
Hey, at least they're consistent.
Yeah. So for this one, I'm going to throw it a 5. And look, like I was saying earlier, I just felt like the original one was a little creepier. It progressed or built up to its finale a little bit better than I thought this one did. And the ending, I thought the first one had a little more of a, let's just say, better ending. Anyways, let's move on to The Raid from 2011. And like you were saying earlier, some places may be called The Raid Redemption. But in a nutshell, it's about a SWAT team who's on a mission to infiltrate this tall apartment complex, which is filled with all these ruthless maniacs and drug addicts. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there are some little plot elements thrown in there to beef it up a bit, but for the most part, this is just, a very fast-paced action movie, pretty much from start to finish. I actually saw this one in theaters when it came out. I was pretty hyped up for it, and it lived up to the hype I felt. It's got some really good fight scenes. There's some good tension here and there when they have to hide from some of these maniacs, and yeah, I just felt like it's a movie that kind of just delivers what any action fan would want it to deliver, as long as you're fine with seeing a lot of hand-to-hand combat as well. So martial arts fans in particular would definitely get a kick out of a kick. Believe it or not, that was not a pun. They'll get a kick out of it.
So this is a movie that I've known about again for a few years. If there's any genre besides horror that I watch quite a bit of, and quite a bit might be a stretch, but I do enjoy action movies now and again. For instance, Die Hard, the perfect movie. Easy 10 out of 10. It's almost a joke, but it's a pretty good movie. So I was interested in this movie based on the basic plot I read. I'm like, oh hey, this sounds pretty decent. And it was pretty decent. I think the fight scenes in this are a lot of fun. One, because you're not necessarily certain who's going to live and who's going to die. You might be like 95% certain, but there might be a few surprises in there. For instance, one of the SWAT team members, I thought, oh hey, he's going to win this, but he did not win. So, I mean, there's a little excitement going on, and plus, it's not just gunfire, but there's a lot of machete action going on, which brings a nice little sharp, stabby element to this. And I mean, those machete fight scenes look painful as hell. Like, I just couldn't imagine. I first of all, I couldn't even imagine holding a machete. Let alone like swinging it at somebody and like trying to avoid the machete being swung at me. That sounds like a fight I would not want to be involved in. And this is just a whole lot of action after action scenes, and there's a little bit of character-driven stuff going on in here. Nothing particularly surprising, but it's still interesting, and it's definitely an action-packed movie that's, if you're okay with foreign movies, it's certainly worth seeing.
There's also some pretty impressive camera work at times in the movie. Like, for instance, there's that one scene where they're chopping through the floor, and the camera actually goes through the hole and keeps shooting. So, little things like that, and it's so easy to kind of miss things like that, but, it is impressive.
I think a big thing about this movie that really worked for me is that it's almost claustrophobic, and it all takes place in a single building, and it actually reminds me of some some movies of the past that, like might take place in just a few rooms. But it's just almost a claustrophobic feeling knowing that hey, you're like surrounded by like 100 people who are trying to kill you. And on a side note, that scene in which they're hiding behind the wall and that guy taps him, his shotties too, and it's like on his cheek. Talk about a painful scene.
Yeah.
Like when he's slowly pulling that out, I was cringing the whole time.
Yeah, the location for this one is really good. I mean, it does get a little bit same after a while. Like, they just seem to be fighting in different rooms that all kind of look the same. But at the same time, like you said, it is quite claustrophobic. And, there's a lot of dead-end hallways, and he has to fight his way to get back out of those situations. Yeah, so it's fast-paced. It's a lot of fun if you're into martial arts. And I just can't see anyone who is... a fan of action or martial arts having a terrible time with this one. I mean, you got to enjoy it on some level, surely. Unless you hate foreign films. I mean, maybe if you dislike foreign films, maybe, but...
Speaking of which, did you watch this one dubbed or subtitled?
Subtitled.
Okay.
Yeah. My Blu-ray doesn't have a dubbed version. I don't know if there are dubbed versions. I guess there are, but...
I would assume there would be, but I really have no idea.
Yeah.
Subtitled for the win.
Yeah. I mean, this movie does have a sequel to if you are aware of that, and it's I don't know if this is exactly what people's thoughts are on the sequel, but this isn't exactly how I feel about the movie, but I've always felt the perception of everyone who watches these two films is that the first one, The Raid, is... Let's compare it to another series, the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. You got Batman Begins, which is a pretty good movie in comparison to this one. It's a good movie, and then you've got The Dark Knight, which is like takes it up a notch and turns it into something epic. And I feel like that's the way a lot of people feel about the sequel to this movie as well. It's kind of like The Dark Knight to its Batman Begins. So maybe, like, because it's got a more intricate plot, it's a lot longer, but it's still just got as much good action, and people seem to enjoy the sequel actually more than the original movie, at least from what I've read on reviews. I haven't seen the IMDb ratings, but I have to assume that's where people go with it.
Yeah, so that interested me. Apparently on IMDb, the first movie has a 7.6, and the second movie has an 8. So...
there you go.
Yeah, it seems to be the perception.
Yeah, and I saw the second one in the theaters too, so... yeah, they're both definitely good movies. Anyways, like I said, there's a few little plot points that come out of it as you watch, but... I mean, this is... from start to finish, just an assault on the senses, I guess. It starts off with action and fighting, and it doesn't stop with the action and fighting pretty much until the end. I enjoy this. 8 out of 10. I would masturbate to it if I was attracted to it. I mean, if I was attracted to martial arts movies sexually.
Are you attracted to Indonesians by any chance? And keep in mind, Indonesia is a big country, so if you say no, you might offend a lot of people.
I don't know.
I mean, Australia's pretty close to Indonesia, so I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I'm giving this movie also an 8 out of 10. Pretty much, it's an action-packed ride from beginning to end, and if you're into action movies of any sort, this is like a non-stop action movie that, if you haven't already seen, I would highly recommend seeing. And
stay off the drugs.
Unless it's a go drug, in which case, by all means, experiment safely.
In fact, actually, speaking of that, just one amusing thing, the bad guy in this movie, the one that they're trying to assassinate, I guess, it was just amusing how when he's kind of gets his damage report of how many people living in the complex had been killed, and he's like, just find out what rooms they're staying in, clean out their stashes, we'll use their stash to pay for their rent or whatever.
Hey, he's a businessman. He's thinking ahead.
Yeah. In fact, I like the opening to his character. You know, we just get to see him kind of executing guys quite brutally, like, you know, you want one by one just shooting them in the head, so the guys actually kind of see their fate before it happens. You know, it's not exactly a great way to go.
Next up, we have the sequel to Fright Night Part 2 from 1988, which follows Charlie Brewster 3 years after the events of the first movie. He's gone through a bunch of therapy, as you can imagine, and he has come to the conclusion that he didn't actually see vampires, he just saw a serial killer, and the vampires are sort of his imagination going wild. But then, of course, more vampires come in, and he's sort of like, oh, hey, there's more vampires. And with the help of Peter Vincent, who he hasn't spoken to in quite some time, they work together again to try to prevent the dangers of this new vampire group. It's like a group of, like, I think 4 vampires. And he also has a new girlfriend because they threw out the first one, and this one's a lot more attractive, so well done, Charlie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was one of my points. Girlfriend, hot. Way better than Marcy.
Like,
what was her name? Marcy and Amy. Sorry.
Yeah, Amy.
I know her as Marcy from Married with Children.
Like, Amy was. I thought Amy was decent. I had no problems with Amy, but that was that was until I saw Alex, played by Tracy Lind, and she is certainly quite the shall we say, seductive. Well, she's hot. She's a
very
hot
nice.
Yeah. So this is a sequel which I had not seen until I watched it. I think, let's say, 5 days ago, and mainly because that's due to the fact I really enjoyed the first Fright Night. The first Fright Night might be my top 5 favorite vampire movies, and I was worried that this sequel might somewhat ruin my perception of the series. And I will say that this sequel did a lot better than I thought it was going to. There's a lot of things I didn't necessarily love, but I did appreciate about this sequel. I don't think it's nowhere near as good as the first movie, but it's a decent follow-up, and if they had changed a few things, I probably would have liked it just a bit more. But it's a decent movie. But before I get to my nitpicky issues with this, what did you think about this one?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Like you're saying, the original Fright Night is one of the best vampire movies out there. I'm not a huge vampire guy, and I consider it to be definitely one of my top choices. And this one, look, it's definitely not as good as the first one overall, and I feel like if this was its own original movie, it probably wouldn't stand even close, but it borrows enough of the style from the original movie, like some of the ways the vampires are and the music, and you know, it's got enough returning characters from the first movie, at least the two of the main characters. So, you know, there's enough that it borrows from the original to help keep this one interesting. Like, Chris Sarandon was definitely a more memorable character than the woman in this one, who's kind of playing the evil vampire this time. But, you know, there was some interesting vampires, I guess. One with a moth-eating fetish, and one guy with mutton chops. It was pretty entertaining, I guess, on some level. And, like I said, hot girlfriend.
So, yeah, I think one of the things about this movie is that I really appreciated was a lot of the music has a very similar, you know, quality 80s vibe that I like in these types of movies. They bring back one of the tunes from the first movie, and they change it up a little, they throw in some lyrics, but it's still a nice little touch to the movie. Another thing that I want to mention positively before I talk about my issues with the movie, I thought the special effects here were overall pretty solid. especially toward the end during the fight with the multiple vampires. There's some really good special effects here that I didn't necessarily expect to see.
Yeah, and hey, you also get a small vampire bowling montage as well.
Yeah, actually, that's one of my problems. So this movie has a bit more of a comedic influence. It's not like it's overbearing, and there's a little comedy in the first movie, to be sure, but this movie falls a little more heavy on the comedic influences, such as a extraordinarily pointless bowling scene, and there's also one of the vampires just going around on roller skates for some reason. I just and that one guy, the one with the mud and traps, that guy just bugged me pretty much throughout the whole movie.
Hey dude, I'm not thirsty.
Now, I did like one of the guys, vampires, I think it was the moth-eating guy, was played by an actor named Brian Thompson, who had a face I recognized, and it took me maybe about 10 minutes to realize that he plays a character in the X-Files, which is a series that I have seen quite a few episodes of, so that's a nice little surprise. It doesn't change much because I don't think his character is really expanded upon here, but it's interesting. And also another note, there's a psychiatrist in this movie who there's a little twist involving his character which I hated, and that also struck me as somewhat pointless. So it's it has a lot of decent things going forward. You have obviously Roddy McDowall coming back as Peter Vincent, and obviously Tracy Lynn does a spicy jalapeno. But yes, but there's also like not necessarily big, but a bunch of things that I feel like they could have done without. And one of the I guess I should also say this: I never liked the whole group of antagonists type thing. I know that technically there's two people in the first movie, but there's only one vampire, and I thought that was an interesting element. Here there's 4 vampires, and that sort of takes out some of the charm, especially since none of these vampires are anywhere near as close as interesting as Chris Sheridan was in the first movie. I mean, the main woman has a little character, and she did do that fantastic intro to Fright Night, which, on a side note, that was a really long intro for a show like that. But hey, I guess if they had to replace the host, they had to replace the host.
Yeah.
The best scene was in the state institution.
The best scene is anytime Tracy Lynn's on the camera. Yeah.
And we might be beating the dead horse or beating something, but
I'll be beating.
you cannot overstate just how otherworldly attractive she is. She is. To be honest, I don't even know the actress. It's a name that sort of I recognize, but it's not a name I recognize from anything I've seen. So it's I do find that interesting. I was expecting her to be maybe a bit of a more well-known actress, but apparently not so much. But I think she does pretty good in this movie too, as far as her performance is concerned. So I do think it's definitely interesting. I'm probably going to throw this one. Let me double check something very quickly.
You're gonna check what you gave the first.
Well, yeah, I think I gave the first one either an 8 or an 8.5, something like that. Probably an 8.
You might have even gave it a 9.
Oh, I'm not. I'm going to quickly double check that because it seems like. Let's see. Oh, actually, my apologies. I did round it up to a 9. 8.5 rounded up to a 9. So I did like some of what this movie did. I especially liked Peter Vincent's character because he has sort of issues with his cowardice, and he sort of tries to overcome that in this movie, and I enjoyed that. But there's just some small issues, the comedic thing, the group of vampires, the pointless Dactyl Trist thing, which I don't really think brought anything to the movie. I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10. I do think it did better than I ever expected it to do, but I still thought it was probably a bit below average. But that said, if you enjoyed the first movie, I don't see a good reason not to go out of your way to see this one.
Wow, 6. That's actually a lot lower than I was expecting.
I am sorry to disappoint.
Okay. Look, I did consider somewhere between a 6 and a 7, but I think I'm going to go with a 7. Like I've been saying, it borrows enough from the original that you can still enjoy it on some level. And look, overall, it's not a bad movie, even if it didn't have those things carried over from the original. But it's definitely not as good. Chris Sarandon is just way more memorable than anything in this movie. It just doesn't get there. But we do have Tracy Lynn.
Yes.
The final movie for today's show is Bruiser from 2000. So this one is about Henry, who is a guy who lets people walk all over him. His boss treats him like shit. His wife cheats on him, with his boss no less. His best friend steals from him. Yeah, he's quite the doormat. And then one day he wakes up without a face, and it just becomes a complete blank white face. And at that point, the vengeance begins. So look, this is a movie... Well, actually, the funny thing is, the very first time I saw this movie, or I can't even say the first time I saw it, but the first time I saw anything from this movie, I was flicking through channels on my cable, and I kind of stopped on this right at the scene where or just before the scene where a certain someone gets thrown out the window. So I started seeing it from the moment where she goes under the table. You can hear his voice, and he's kind of batting chairs, and probably the creepiest part of the movie. Not that it's a creepy movie, and probably the most slashery type moment in the movie, I guess. At least moment. So, I mean, if there's any scene that you want to start with, maybe that scene is the best one. But look, overall, I actually do somewhat enjoy this movie, and I know a lot of people out there give it some hate, especially because it's a Romero movie, and they compare it to everything else he's done, which is pretty much mostly those zombie movies that he's done. And, people are like, he should just stick to zombies or straight horror movies and not this kind of thriller character study type movie. But I personally enjoyed it, and I'll go through a number of different reasons why. But before I do, what have you got to say on this one?
Yeah, so I don't want to come across as too brusque about this. I will say I sort of hated this from beginning to end. I just hated it. And I think part of it is because it's not... It's like... There's horror elements, and there's like maybe you could argue mystery elements, there's comedy elements. For what... I have to say this. So the movie's an hour and 40 minutes long. I still have no idea what bruiser means. Like, the name of the magazine. What's a bruiser? Am I missing something?
It bruises your dick?
Yeah, I that's the only thing that came to mind. But it just, I know. From everything we saw, it didn't seem like it was a nude magazine. It just seemed like it was just...
It's like a fashion type
thing. So,
yeah.
Like if it's like a Playboy type thing, it would make more sense, but...
They must be to some extent. Like, we don't really learn enough about the magazine to know what's in it, but I have a feeling like it's somewhat at least soft pornish type.
Well, we do know enough about the owner of the magazine, though, to know it should be shut down. Because that guy, now, it's an actor I'm not particularly familiar with, and Peter
Stormare.
Yeah. And you have some interesting things to say about him, I'm sure, on, shall we say, his equipment. But, his character, I don't understand it at all. It's like some rich guy who sleeps with every woman he can. I mean, I get it. I've seen characters like that before, but this guy takes it to like 11. And I think it's part of the problem. I don't understand any of these characters. I don't understand the main character. Like, he sees his wife cheating on him with his spouse, and he doesn't react at the time, which I can understand, but just divorce her. Like, it's not hard. Like, but over 50% of people in this country get divorced. You can do it. Just do it.
I think it's more of a money thing, but
I,
You know, that's what they play up in the film, because, you know, she's going to take him for all his money. And
yeah, I have to say that I think happiness is probably more important than money, and this guy's neither apparently. And I don't know, I didn't understand any of these characters. I feel like this movie is trying to not necessarily teach us something, but it had a bit of a deeper thing going on. I don't get the whole white face thing. I mean, it's not like he had an identity killing people. I guess he was finally standing up for himself, but I mean, I just I just hated this. There's some interesting things going on, and hey, it had Misfits in it on the side note if you happen to know that band. But this is admittedly a struggle to get through. It had a few interesting scenes, and some of them I thought were okay, but overall I just had difficulty with this one.
Well, okay. Well, I've got a number of different things to talk about here. Okay, first we'll talk about Peter Stormare. Now, he is actually quite well known, I think. He's been in a lot of, you know, or he's had some decent roles in some movies.
And actually, I'm sorry, I just now noticed he is in Fargo, and I have seen Fargo, so I knew I sort of recognized the face, but I didn't click until just now. So
he plays a few notable appearances or performances. He is in The Big Lebowski. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that movie. But he does play a pretty amusing character in that one. He's in the movie Clown. He's the keeper of the clown suit, or whatever it was. I can't recall now. It's been a while since I've seen that movie. Or the brother of whoever originally owned that clown suit. And he's also got his own character in a video game. If you've ever seen or played Until Dawn, he plays the psychologist type character that pops up every now and then throughout that game. And not just the voice, I actually have him in the game. So if you haven't played that, I recommend it, especially if you're a horror fan. And just one last thing while we're on Peter Stormare. Well, actually, still a couple more things. Now, there is a scene earlier in the movie where, you know, he's a major dick, and at some point he actually flashes his equipment. And so just, if there's anyone out there looking to see Peter Stormare's dick, you can see it if you pause at the right moment.
And of course, Chucky knows the exact moment he should be past it.
Yeah, it's like 11 minutes, 36 seconds. I don't know, I just threw that number out, I don't know.
I'm sure you did.
But it's early, it's very early in the movie. I guess one other thing, which I just found amusing, look, he might play it a little over the top, I guess, but he is still amusing to some degree and also annoying to some degree. Like the scene where he's out on the streets and the cops are talking to him. They're kind of just looking at him weird because he has no pants on, which is kind of funny. But also, towards the end, like there's a moment where he's having sex with some woman in a Portaloo type thing, and Henry asks him something, and he's like, what do you think? I was having the shit of a lifetime. I don't know, it's just, there's some funny lines in the movie. But outside of his character, there's a couple of characters, like, you know, it's nice to see Tom Atkins in the movie. Horror fans should be quite familiar with him from a number of different movies. I mean, I mostly identify him with Maniac Cop, but some people, you know, throughout Night of the Creeps, Halloween 3, and all these other movies. My Bloody Valentine remake, I believe he was in that, if I recall correctly. So, you know, he's one of those actors that you just like to see because he's involved in the genre so much. In addition to that, look, Jason Flemyng, who plays Henry, the lead character in the movie, I think he's a decent actor overall, but look, there's parts to this movie where I felt he did a good job and maybe didn't suit the role. I think he played the doormat type element pretty well. I don't think he quite sold the other aspect, the more vengeful side to the character. And that line towards the end, I stood up for myself. I don't know, that line just, it didn't work for me. Another amusing thing, I don't know if anyone has made this connection, but I call it the Spartacus ending. where everyone's kind of like, I'm Spartacus, I'm Spartacus, I'm Spartacus. And in this movie, it's all these people just jumping up saying, I'm the killer, or it's me, it's me, it's
That's
me.
another scene I did not much care for.
But you did touch on the Misfits. I actually have seen them live twice. Very enjoyable to watch live, and their involvement in this movie definitely helps my rating as well. I feel like if they weren't in the movie, my rating would go down. They're actually in the movie for like 10 plus minutes, and they actually play, I think, 4 different songs in the movie. A couple of them were actually written for this movie, and they did that in exchange for Romero directing one of their music videos. So them in the movie definitely helped a lot.
Yeah, so I think one of my issues with this movie, and I don't blame Romero for this. I mean, he can make whatever. I mean, he's deceased now, but anybody can make whatever movies they want to make. That's fine. I don't judge them for that. But this movie seemed all over the place. Like I said, it has a bit of thriller elements. It has a bit of slasher-esque elements. It has a bit of comedy thrown. Like the ending, I hated the ending so much. Like, incredibly hated it. Like, if you had to rate just the ending, it's like a -10. So they threw a hodgepodge of different things into an hour and 40-minute movie, and some of it was okay, but for the most part it's mixed in with people I don't understand in a society I don't understand, doing things I just don't get, and it's a hard movie for me to even come close to relating to. Like, even like the radio show the guy's listening to, like a shock jock type guy, I don't see the entertainment value in that. It didn't click, which I guess is the basic problem with this movie. Nothing in this movie clicked for me, which, you know, may say more about me than it would about the movie. I'm okay with that, but I just know that it's not quite anything I was particularly looking for. So it was interesting. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, so look, I definitely get why people may not enjoy this movie. I think it does have its problems, but they're problems that I tend to forgive, and I still enjoy this movie. And, you know, some of that is just some of the awkward characters, especially Peter Stormare. I don't know, I just like it. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, and I await your very intense rating for this one.
I don't know if this is the worst movie of the night. It's hard to be a worst movie of the night during the same show that you do Paranormal Activity too. But, actually, yeah, I think this is a bit worse. Like I said, it's really hard for me to enjoy a movie when I just don't get it. And the best example I can come up with is Only God Forgives. I have a feeling there's more to Only God Forgives than I got, and I hated that movie so much. And I have a feeling it's a sort of similar thing here. This is trying to tell us something about identity and something that just didn't click with me. And it might have made an interesting character drama type thing on like a Lifetime or something, but it didn't work for me. So I'm giving this one a 4 out of 10, mainly because I like that scene where he confronted his friend in the tennis racket club. I enjoyed that. The friend was a bit of a dick. I mean, he seemed like an okayish guy, and he's like, "Oh, I'm just stealing thousands of dollars from you, sorry, bro." Like, I mean, everybody in this guy's life is a dick apparently, but besides the woman, but then the woman, I don't know, it's just, I had not a good time. I'll just leave it at that. So 4 out of 10 seems, I mean, hey, it's not the Greasy Strangler, so take that as you will.
Did you enjoy the ending, the Take On Me ending?
I am going to lean short, not particularly.
Okay.